Hi everyone, welcome to another music theory video. In this video the focus is intervals. So we start looking at generic intervals to begin with before we look at more complex intervals. So an interval, first of all, is the word we use to measure the distance between two specific notes. And as I said, we're going to discuss generic intervals to begin with and using the stave here to measure them. So when two notes occupy the same line or a space, as these two do here, they are a first apart. Now that sounds a little bit weird. Think of them as rungs of a ladder. If you've got 2 feet on the same rung, and that rung is number 1, you're both on the same line. That is a first, right? If two notes share the same line or space, they are a first. So C to C there is an example of a first. A D to a D is an example of a first. E to an E is an example of a first. Nice and easy, nice and simple. Okay. If we were to add accidentals in, they are still firsts. That's a really, really important point to note from the outset. Yes, we are looking at two different notes in that first example. C to C sharp, the D to a D flat. Those notes are changing, but how they are presented to us on the stave, they are still both sharing the same line or the same space. So they are still firsts. Okay, really important thing to remember. As the notes become further apart in the stave, the interval types increase. So if we go from one line to the very next space, so in this case C to a D, that's an example of a second. A D to an E is also an example of a second. An E to an F. Notes that are one space apart are seconds. So if you share the same line or space, in the previous example it is a first. As soon as we start moving up, these are examples of seconds. Here are the examples of thirds. Very, very simple. You can see where this is going. Okay. Notice that thirds will always share the same staff position type, either both on a line or both on a space. So thirds are 2 lines apart or 2 spaces apart there. Okay. So obviously there's that note, the second interval is in between them. Okay. So there are the examples of fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, and octaves. Rather than eighths, we call that octave because that's where we reach the same note, C to the next C or D to the next D. Very, very simple, our generic intervals, and there's a chart of them all there. So that's how we'd see them. Remember, the first are two notes that share the same line or space. And then as the notes get further apart, we have all the intervals there going up to an octave. And of course, they can continue further up to a 9th, a 10th, 11th, etc. So we're going to look at specific intervals now. And these are measured both on the stave and in semitones on the keyboard. So as we learned in the previous section, a C to a D and C to a D flat, they are both examples of seconds. If you do ignore the accidentals there, they look like seconds from one note to the very next one. Specifically, however, C to D is 1 semitone larger than C to D flat. So C to D, 2 semitones. C to D flat, only 1 semitone. Okay, so those two intervals will sound differently, and as we know from our tones, semitones and accidentals video, we've got a tone and a semitone being a difference. So how do we equate that and how do we present that? Okay, so let's look at some specific intervals. So first of all, a major second, and in this little video the major second is going to be indicated by a capital letter M. So that C to D in this example is a major second because it is a generic second on the stave and it is 2 semitones on the keyboard. Those are the two things to remember. A second on the stave and 2 full semitones. E to F sharp is another example of a major second. One step away on the stave from a line to the next space, and because of that, F sharp, it is 2 semitones. So those are two examples of a major second. A major third is made up of 4 semitones. So C to E is a major third. We see there by looking at the stave, it looks like a generic third. Okay, but it goes up 4 semitones. You can count them there: C to C sharp 1, D 2, D sharp 3, 4 semitones to get to that E natural. E to G sharp, another example of a major third. Okay, E to G, there's the third on the stave. Count up your 4 semitones: F, F sharp, G, G sharp. E to G sharp is your major third. A perfect fourth is made up of 5 semitones. So if you were to get from C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, should get to F. There we go. And we call this a perfect fourth. In major and minor scales, the interval of the fourth and the interval of the fifth do not change. They are perfect. They do not alter. So that's why we don't call them major or minor intervals. They are perfect intervals. So if C to F is perfect fourth, if we were to start on F and go up to perfect fourth, we should get to a B, F, G, A, B, and let's just count the semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's 5 semitones, I should get to B flat. There we go. Alright. Perfect fifth is made up of 7 semitones. There it is there, C to a G. If I had to start on B, for example, B to F sharp, there are my 7 semitones there. A major 6 is made up of 9 semitones. So there's an example there from C to an A. And the intervals counted there for you on the keyboard on the right hand side. Another example starting on E flat. If we go up 9 semitones and count them, we get to C. So again, the understanding of the layout of a keyboard is a real advantage in understanding these specific intervals. Major seventh, 11 semitones. Okay. Obviously, if we go one more semitone again, we get back to C. So there are 12 semitones then of our chromatic scale. Another example of a major seventh, D to C sharp. Another example there of a major seventh. And there's my example of the perfect octave, as I just mentioned, C to C. Okay. So the term major and perfect refer to the interval's quality. So only seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths can have a major quality. Firsts, fourths, and fifths, as I said, use perfect instead. So we've looked at the major intervals, and now let's look at the minor intervals. Okay, so a minor interval has one less semitone than a major interval. So for example, C to E was a major third, 4 semitones. So C to E flat is the minor third. So a minor third is have to go up 3 semitones. Okay. E to G is an example of a minor third, since E to G sharp was the major third, which was 4 semitones. Since minor intervals transform from major intervals, only seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths can be minor. Okay. So you can see those there. And if we want to change a first interval, or a fourth interval, or a fifth interval, we can augment an interval if we want to raise it. So for example, since C to F is a perfect fourth, 5 semitones, C to F sharp, 6 semitones, we'd call an augmented fourth. So there's that letter A there to call that augmented, as I said there, to raise these specific intervals. We can't do that yet to these intervals, but if we want to alter fourths and fifths, particularly, or octaves, then that's what we do. F to B, a normal one, would be 6 semitones there. That's an example of an augmented fourth. If you remember, F to B flat was the perfect fourth when we looked at it a little while ago. Now, major intervals can be augmented as well by adding a semitone. For example, since C to A was a major 6, which is 9 semitones, if I want to raise that another one by sharpening it, C to A sharp is an augmented 6, so 10 semitones. D flat to B is also an augmented 6, since D flat to B flat would have been a major 6. Now, these are important because we're going to look at some complex chords in some of our musical analysis, so knowing intervals like the augmented fourth and certainly the augmented 6 are going to be really, really important. Going back to our fourths and fifths, we talked about stretching that interval by raising the note at the top. We could also lower it, of course. So a diminished interval has one less semitone than a perfect interval. So since C to G is a perfect fifth, 7 semitones, C to a G flat would be a diminished fifth, 6 semitones. B to F, also a diminished fifth. Okay, B to F sharp would have been a perfect fifth. Okay. Now we can diminish other ones as well. So minor intervals can also be diminished by subtracting a further semitone. So recall that C to B is a major seventh, 11 semitones, and C to B flat is a minor seventh, 10 semitones. So if I wanted C to B double flat, 9 semitones, that's an example of a diminished seventh interval. Okay. Now this chart shows the relationship among the different interval qualities. Okay. And more importantly, this chart shows the number of semitones that each specific interval contains. Okay. So if I wanted to go up from a C up to a perfect fifth, I go up 7 semitones. If I wanted to go from a C up to a major sixth, I go up 9 semitones. If I wanted to go from a C up to a diminished sixth, I go up 7 semitones, and so on.